Alright, so in the last video we styled the showcase region. So now we're going to work on the newsletter, the subscribe to the newsletter division right here. And what we're going to do is get it to match the general appearance of the header. So what we'll do first is just copy and paste the CSS for the header. So I'm going to put a comment in here. I'm going to style the newsletter div. Close that hidden comment. And I'm going to go up and grab the header styling, and we'll just copy and paste that down into here. And we need to change this name to match what we have here. So we're working on the newsletter division, so we're going to delete header and replace it with newsletter. So just come in and replace this with newsletter. And then make sure that that's applying. So it should be applying down here. So there we've got the first application. The text up here was set at 1.5 ems, I believe. So I'm going to take the text down here and also set the text to display at 1.5 ems. So we'll see if we can tuck it right into the newsletter. I may have to do this differently. So we're going to do font size. I'm going to try 1.5 ems, and let's see if that's grabbing for us. So that looks a little bit better. Okay, so the next thing we're going to need to do is fix an error I made in the previous video. So inside the newsletter division, we have a container that contains the describe to the our newsletter text. And then and this is that container that floats and keeps things centered and a certain percent of the page width. I also have that container wrapped around the form, and the form is inside its own subscribe division. So we need to do something similar here. So inside this container, I should have wrapped this text in its own little division. So I'm going to do that now, and I'm not going to bother to give it an ID. I'm just going to say this is going to be class equals, and it's going to be a cheesy name, but I need it to fix things. So I'm going to call it content. And then we'll close that division off. And this will give us a division that we can float left. I could have just floated the container left, except there's two containers, and so it would get a little sticky. So having a division that I can apply a float left to is going to be really useful in this particular case. So what I want to do is take this content, and I want to float it left, and I want to take this subscribe ID and float it to the right, so that I can get the subscribe fields over here, the form on the right hand side, and the subscribe to our newsletter over here on the left hand side. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to step down and say div pound subscribe. And subscribe is this division right here containing the form that has the input filled in the button. And we're going to tell that to float left. So we're going to tell this guy to float, not to the right, sorry, right hand side of the page, not the left hand side of the page. And then we're going to take this container this content division that we just constructed right here, and we're going to float him to the left. So because I made him a class, I'm going to be very specific, and I'm going to say div pound newsletter dot content. If you're a content division inside of the newsletter, please float over to the left hand side of the page. So going into the CSS, I'm going to step down here and go div pound newsletter dot content. If you're a content class inside of the newsletter ID, then we want you to float left to the other side of the page. So we're going to float one side left and one side right. So we want to take and refresh and make sure that's applying correctly. And then it looks like we need to add some padding to the top of each of those. So right here, this dot content, let's add some padding top. Let's try 1.2 0.2 M's and see how that looks. And we want to add the same amount of padding to the subscribe. So padding top, and we're going to go 1.2 M's and save those changes and just take a peek. And what we're wanting is to push things down we're wanting to push things down the same way roughly. So I think this side here is done. Now we want to style this a little bit. We want to make this taller, and I think we want this input field to be about 25 pixels tall, but I also would like to have some padding inside of it so that when I'm typing it's not right up against those edges. So to get it 25, we're going to add 5 pixels of padding and 15 pixels of height, which should take it to 25 pixels, because remember heights are in a box model, the margin, the padding, the borders, they add up to the overall size of the object. So in my div pound subscribe, I have an input tag, right? So in my HTML code, in my subscribe division, I have an input tag, and I want to make this guy taller. So we're going to say height. We're going to try 15 pixels, and then we're going to add padding of 5 pixels. So again, there's padding. This will put padding on both the top and the bottom, so we'll get 5 twice, which is 10 pixels plus 25 pixels. Should be 25 pixels total height. And then let's make sure that the background color inside that box is white. I could just spell white, or I could be, that guy and FFF, do it in hex. So let's save that and make sure that that's looking okay. So save. So I've got this guy bigger, and now when I type into it, the letters aren't mashed up against the tops and the sides. And we want to increase this button to match, so we want to get him wider and taller. He's not going to have padding, so we'll just directly make him 25 pixels. So I'm going to grab this, I'm going to copy this, and we'll just change div pound subscribe, we'll change input to button. We'll get rid of the padding in the background color, and I'm just going to change the height to 25 pixels, which should match the 15 plus 10 pixels on that. So let's make sure that's looking okay. So there I've got my height, and then let's take and make this wider. So let's make a width of about 85 pixels maybe. So width is, let's say, 85 pixels, and let's do a text transform and capitalize, so uppercase. The mistake I made later was calling it capitalize. So text transform to uppercase, and I think that looks good enough for government work. So we're going to end here, and we're going to change the name on this next division to the services division. We'll go ahead and style that one next.